Everybody, it has been 10 years, over 10 years now, since we started building community here together on YouTube around recovery from mental illness and building and maintaining great mental health and fitness. It has been an honor to be part of this with you. And, it's been 12 years now since I ditched the mental illness diagnoses. And I know when I started doing sharing about mental health online, sharing about recovery. I used to always get tons of hate mail about, recovery. You'll be managing this forever. It's chronic. You can't get over it. And at first, of course, stepping into something like that, you just assume, okay, well, maybe, I don't know, yeah, maybe they're right. There's something I'm missing here. But yeah, it's been, 12 years now since I ditched the mental illness diagnoses, and things continue very well. And I wanted to share in honor of 10 years of us doing this and building these skills, a series of videos, to 10 videos on a lot of the questions that often come up around recovery, but also some of the key skills and learnings from the past decade plus. What's really involved with building better mental health and fitness, and then maintaining that. So in this video, we're going to look at three things. First up, is recovery possible? And when we talk about recovery, what are we actually talking about there? So how do we define recovery? The second part of the video is going to look at the symptoms I used to struggle with and where things are at now. So I think that's really what people tend to want to see when we're talking about recovery. Let's very practically, how have things changed? But then the third part, because we're going to be talking about all this great stuff about recovery, but what if we just ditch the whole concept of recovery altogether? In fact, don't recover. Forget recovery, because chasing recovery and trying to get it right and perfect easily becomes the new compulsion that just keeps us trapped in struggling. Okay? So, but having said that, we will now get started on a video about recovery. So first section, first question here, is recovery possible? Yes. I'm not managing mental illness. I am not struggling with any of the symptoms I had in the past. I have not for more than a decade. Mental illness was about how I was interacting with experiences inside of my head, my body, and the world around me. There's no scientific reason why I would continue to struggle with it. Saying it's chronic is like saying, hey, you hit yourself in the face with a frying pan once, you're going to do it again. I could go back to all of the coping and checking and controlling and all of the compulsions I used to do around experiences, but that wouldn't be something that would happen to me. That's something I would have to choose to start doing around those experiences again. It's not a disorder. That just has very natural consequences, like hitting yourself in the face with a frying pan. Of course, that is going to have consequences that you don't like. I did not like hitting myself in the face with a frying pan, so I do not plan to go back to doing it. Now, along with this, let's define recovery. But I actually don't think it's as useful to define recovery. I find it's more useful to define great mental health and fitness, and we'll get into why that is. So I would define great mental health and fitness as the practice of being myself while having any thought or feeling. So it's about living my life. It's about the freedom to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it with anything happening in my brain. Often that definition is not satisfying if what we're looking for is reassurance that we're going to get rid of the anxiety, the intrusive thoughts, the derealization, the false memories, the shame, the guilt, the depression, the empty donut box, the depersonalization, right? All of these horrible things we want to make sure are never going to happen again. The issue, though, is that hating on those things and trying to avoid and control them is actually the problem. It is what got us into this. And so the question of, will I recover and get rid of these things, is no different than somebody asking, well, if I wash my hands a millionth time, will I finally feel that they're clean? If I have a massive drinking binge this weekend, will I finally satisfy the cravings, the urges, etc.? It is the question that is wrapped up in the problem. So not the right question, but also I think in this video we're going to explore it. Also, I don't struggle with any of that stuff anymore. However, if I did, that wouldn't be a problem. Having said that, of course, because people want to know, like, if I do this work, this really difficult, sweaty work, is the outcome going to be that I'm going to stop having these experiences? I will explain. We're going to do this. This is your 10-year anniversary gift. I will explain the symptoms that I struggled with in the past and what it's like not to have any of them now. But again, if I did have them, that would be okay. I'm still not going to go and hit myself in the face with the frying pan because of it. Let's get into what the experience was like in the past. There's no starting point at which to begin describing mental illness symptoms. So I'll just jump right into, because I can think of one off the top of my head immediately that's so different now from how it used to be, and that was just that I was always anxious. That was simply, there was this constant, never-ending baseline of what I now would see as high anxiety that was always there, and I was always ruminating in my head and either obsessing about things in the past and trying to transactionally somehow compensate for them, or plan all of these different possible avenues into the future and things that could go wrong, and constantly having imaginary conversations in my head. But then it was also things like I wouldn't touch knives. By the time I went and got help, I would see myself either slicing off my body parts or stabbing somebody else. So I had just stopped using knives. I would see horrible things happening in my head all the time. Like, just, I wouldn't walk past the playground near where I lived because I'd see kids falling and their heads smashing open. I'd see terrible things happening just to people on the streets all over the time. And this was so consistent and normal for me that when I finally went to get help, I didn't even mention it as a symptom, because to me, the time your brain constantly seeing horrible things happening and feeling very real. Like, I would get nauseous a lot of the time from seeing these things. That was just how brains operated. I wasn't. I would see I would see myself, if I was walking up a staircase, I would see myself falling and smashing my teeth in, and they would hurt. So also I was, consistently becoming disconnected from reality, but also experiencing physical sensations that would make me think someone was really wrong. So it wouldn't just be seeing an image of something bad happening. Every uncomfortable experience of my body was cancer, or I'd been poisoned. I would, go to get HIV tests all of the time because I'd be convinced something maybe I'd touched and now I had HIV. But also on the poisoning, I was convinced people were watching me and trying to hurt me. I would throw food out. I would have to check food. I would do all sorts of things differently in my home, hide things, because of course these people were watching me, and they might have seen where I put my wallet there, so I've got to close my curtains, and now I'm gonna hide my wallet in some other place or something like that. And again, I really believed that people were watching me and were out to get me, to the point that I did not bring that up when I went to get help, because that, to me, that was just true. That was a fact. Looking back now, some of my earliest memories are of obsessing and doing compulsions, believing I'd done something terrible, and then just for weeks believing that bad things were going to happen to me because of it. And I would often have experiences like that where I would just be in this kind of alternating anxiety, obsession, panic attack spiral for weeks, trying to control some bad thing that I was convinced would happen. Also, I wasn't driving as I got older. I didn't drive because I was convinced that either I would kill somebody or I had killed somebody while driving. So if I was driving again, the police were, of course, out looking for me and they would find me. I was often afraid that I had committed some crime. So also how I would interact with stores, or if I had a bag, I wouldn't go in a store because somehow I would end up stealing something. So better to just not go in there. I wasn't taking care of myself. I struggled with addiction. I could lose entire days to compulsions where I would just start doing compulsions in the morning and then the sun would be setting and I would have no idea where the time went. I would procrastinate on things all the time again because really I was just doing all of these compulsions and then I would have to, stay up all night, pull these all-nighters to get things done. I struggled with false memories, constantly checking my memories and seeing if they felt real and if I'd, done these horrible, terrible things. Because I was anxious all the time and really cultivating just armies of butterflies in my stomach, I had a lot of digestion issues. Ever since I was a little kid, I really struggled with emetophobia. I was, terrified of vomit and nausea and would do all sorts of controlling compulsions and avoiding around food and when I ate and how I ate. But also, I would struggle with binge eating. So there are all sorts of foods I didn't want to have in the house. And really, the kitchen in general was a source of so many compulsions, not just the knives, the poisoning, etc. But I wasn't touching raw meat. I was terrified of cooking for somebody else because, of course, I would poison them. I had so many rituals in the kitchen, and of course, appliances, unplugging all sorts of appliances, checking them again, even checking. If an appliance was unplugged, then I would have to move it even further away from the plug because somehow it would, I don't know, jump into the plug or something would happen. But the stove, I would check the stove all the time. I would do, touch it, make sure it was off, wiggle the knobs. But I got to the point where I would just stand in front of the stove and watch it. So it feels like it's off and it looks like it's off. And I mean, it is off. But okay, hear me out here. Like, what if it's not? So why don't we just stay here and watch it? There were actually a lot of different ways I became disconnected from reality. I used to check my passport, my license. I would check photos of myself to feel that it was me, and I would often be convinced it wasn't me. And so if I was going to the airport or something, I would be certain that I was going to hand over my passport and then get arrested because I was impersonating somebody. I also would develop all sorts of ridiculous perceptions of other people, struggled with tons of social anxiety, would end relationships all of the time. I didn't have any likes or dislikes because I liked whatever anybody else liked because I wanted them to like me. I didn't want to have conflict. At the same time, if anything went wrong and anything, I had to leave it. I would change careers, change countries, change relationships, change everything constantly just to get away from anything that wasn't right. But then too, I had tons of contamination compulsions because also I would feel things that were wrong on myself. So I would wash my hands under scalding hot water un, until they would hurt because I would use the pain as reassurance. Otherwise, I would keep going back. And even then, I would still question if it really felt painful enough, if it felt clean enough. And I would just keep going with all of this self sabotaging. I had tons of compulsions too around finances. And so some of it was, the constantly checking wallet, money, keys, the checking locks was a huge one. The worry that everything was going to get stolen, everything was going to fall apart at any moment, but also just lots of compulsions around even numbers. I struggle with something called dyscalculia. I think it's pronounced. I can't remember, but I would not. I would lose connection with numbers. It was part of the losing connection with reality. Where, for instance, I remember doing this multiple times back in the days when I was a teacher. I would know how many students were in a class, but then I wouldn't be able to count the number of handouts that I needed for the number of students, and I would come up with all sorts of other numbers. And again, it was just my brain getting caught up on this certainty and this correctness, and then, oh, but what if that's wrong? I would have all sorts of compulsions or two around the, fear of bad things happening around numbers, that I would make a mistake, that something would happen with the tax authorities. So if I got a piece of mail from the tax authority, I would just go into have a panic attack and not open it. And so just avoid it, which is of course not the smart thing to do if you want to prevent something going wrong. I struggled with bad misophonia, which is the set of compulsions around sounds, but particularly the physical experiences. So I would hear there were particular sounds, and it wouldn't just be about hearing the sound. The sound would create this really uncomfortable physical experience, which right now I can still remember, even though I actually feel the physical experience when I bring up the memory, even though the sounds no longer cause any issues. But then because of that, I would do all of this controlling around sounds, and then I wouldn't do anything I wanted to do if the wrong sounds were there, but it would also be physically uncomfortable. It's like sounds got mixed up with pain. So that was a very unpleasant experience. I wouldn't do one of the biggest problems, and where I finally became aware that I had to do something, was that I had always wanted to be a writer. I took time off to write. So took time off from work. I wasn't in work. I was just going to write, and I couldn't. I'd just spend all day doing compulsions or get caught up on feelings, and then because I had lots of compulsions around writing, it had to be all of these things had to be right and so on, and of course then they were never right, and I would just do more compulsions to try to get that right feeling, and it would never come. And so all of this too is just incredibly depressing. But yeah, when I first went to get help, it was for depression, because too I didn't see anything that I just described. I did not see an issue with, except the writing. I'd start, oh, like I really want to be a writer and I can't write now. But losing control like that was, yeah, it was depressing. I was in a point where everything I thought was just the end of the world, and that was kind of the point where I started to get help. But even then, I just went in and really explained that, because I thought all of the other controlling and all of the stuff I was constantly checking was absolutely rational and necessary and helping me, because I was preventing all of these bad things from happening. There was so much more. Like, really understand. It was a complete totalizing way of being. We've only just begun to scratch the surface here. If I did not mention the exact symptom that you're struggling with and you're having a panic attack now, I apologize. If you ask about it below, I will not give you reassurance. I will just tell you something that, will make you even more panicky. But maybe if you bring it up, I'll tell you what was involved with cutting out the compulsions around that. Because understand, there was no special secret to this. I, just had to learn totally evidence-based mental health skills. I did not take any medication, not on any medication now. I didn't have to get a lobotomy. There was nothing I had to put in my brain other than the alien implants and the chip the CIA uses to track me. There's nothing that's changed about my brain. Okay, that was a joke. That was a joke. Is it though? I had to make changes. I had to learn how to interact with experiences inside my head and outside in the world around me in different ways than I had in the past. That was sweaty, difficult, challenging work, just like improving physical fitness. It's really no different. But it's so important now. I want to emphasize it is amazing not dealing with any of the things I had to struggle with in the past. It's great not being anxious all the time and having all sorts of those weird digestion issues. It's one of the most incredible things is not having to see violent things happening to other people, happening to myself all the time. Again, if that happened now, it wouldn't be a problem. But because I don't do all those compulsions around it, yeah, it doesn't happen because if my brain threw up stuff, it's not gonna get a reaction out of me on it. I can use the kitchen now. I could use the stove. I could use all of the knives in the kitchen. I can touch anything. I can cook for others. I can bring people together. I can build relationships. I can write a book. I can stay at home. I've written a book. It's been translated into 10 different languages. It's amazing connecting with readers around it, but in part, especially because that is not something I could have done without applying the skills in the book and continuing to apply them. So it's amazing being able to do the things I always wanted to do. I worked for many years as a management consultant, leading teams of executives dealing with big challenges in their companies, often at the front of the room, taking them through a lot of uncertainty. That would have terrified me in the past. I would have avoided it and done so many compulsions around it in the past. I can work with people now on their mental health and take that journey of recovery along with them. And often, as they're going through extremely difficult and challenging experiences, real experiences in their lives, in the past, I wouldn't have done something like that because I would have gotten so wrapped up in the difficult experiences they were having or the symptoms, right? I would have, if somebody else was talking about a symptom, suddenly I would have had that in the past. But now, and it's so integral to the work I do now with people around mental health, is that taking care of my mental health and fitness allows me to step into those turbulent waters and not get pulled under. Just like we need lifeguards to do if somebody's drowning, the water's turbulent, that capacity to get into the water and not get sucked up in the problem. It's absolutely necessary to what I do now on a daily basis. I can build relationships and friendships and maintain them. I can go to the gym and pursue fitness goals in a healthy way. I can eat in a way that fuels doing the things I love doing in the world. And maybe most special of all, or most necessary of all, I can do nothing. I can not have anything to do. I can simply be with myself and my brain and not get caught up in all sorts of obsessions and compulsions in my head or struggle with boredom or anything like that. I can simply be on my own. I can be quiet. There can be nothing happening. And that's wonderful. Simply the capacity to practice being. And now the last part. So maybe this whole recovery thing sounded pretty appealing. Sounds great to go and do all of the things you ever wanted to do in life whenever you want to do them. Wonderful. Now just completely throw out the concept of recovery. Because recovery is not a place you have to go to. And it's not this thing to chase and to get right and to get perfect because we just want to avoid a whole bunch of experiences we don't like. That is what got us into this. Recovery is a practice. And me, so being, let's say, 12 years post recovery, there is absolutely no difference between where I am right now. And if this is, maybe you just found out, hey, I've got some mental health issues and I want to start working on them. We are in the exact same place because great mental health and fitness is a practice and we can all practice it right now. It is the practice of being ourselves without having any thought or feeling. All we ever have is the choice to have an experience inside of us, outside of us, wherever, and make a choice to give our time and energy to things that we care about, to that practice of being ourselves. Recovery is not a thing you get. It's not a place you go to. It's not a thing you can ruin. All anybody will ever have is that choice in this moment to give their time and energy to something they care about. In many ways, leaving the mental illness behind involves leaving it behind. It's about completely shifting the focus of how we spend our time and energy in life. So it's no longer about avoiding and controlling brain stuff. It becomes about creating and building the things we care about. It's about supporting our community. It's about breaking down systemic barriers and creating a society where people can practice being themselves. It's about improving access to mental health skills. It's about building relationships. It's about growing the incredible, amazing things we want to have in our own lives and the lives of those around us. I know this can seem weird and terrifying because when we're struggling, it's like there's this monster screaming at us that it's gonna bite off our head and bite off the heads of everybody we love at any moment if we don't give it all of our attention. And to suggest that we're gonna just walk casually away from it can seem weird and terrifying, but that's what we'll explore over the videos ahead. So there'll be 9 more videos really looking at lessons learned from the past decade plus of recovery, and hopefully that can be a support on your own journey. But right now, I'm just so grateful to everybody that it's been such an honor to do this together and to explore how we take care of our mental health and make these skills and this journey more accessible to people, because it's not a secret. It doesn't have to be this weird, far off thing. We can all come together and work on taking care of our mental health and fitness today and doing the things we really want to do in the world. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this community and the privilege to work with you for 10 years on our squishy thought appliance adventures.